Everything had to go through EPA for environmental approval. And part of that is the endangerment finding. It was used as this blanket, blunt force instrument to really control and ultimately destroy the economy of the United States. If environmentalists want the United States to regulate greenhouse gases, and you want it at a federal level, then Congress needs to pass that law.
Hear, hear. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy right here in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And to kick things off for us this week, we actually have some almost breaking news as of our recording. Just about a little over an hour ago, we officially got the word and a press conference was held that the EPA under the Trump administration is officially axing the so-called endangerment finding. This is, of course, the EPA regulatory decision that happened under the Obama administration that really underpins the entire federal climate regulation apparatus, if you will. This repeal is tailored specifically towards motor vehicles, and there's a whole litany of regulations that go along with that as well. So it's not the whole kit and caboodle. There's still stationary source regulations that I'm sure that they will be looking at as well. But nevertheless, a real milestone when it comes to deregulation and the nexus between what statute says and what federal regulators try to do.
Yeah, this is huge. And I don't know if you know the movie Open Range with Kevin Costner and Robert Duvall. And there's this just excellent line as they're about ready to fight. You know, it's the last standoff, fight the bad guys. And Robert Duvall looks at Kevin Costner and says, "It's a good day to make things right." That's why I feel this is a good day to make things right. This is this is the linchpin. It's the underpinning legally, and then there is some speculative science that is, quote, behind it. If you were to imagine a giant Jenga game and you pulled out the one block that kept the whole thing up, that's what the endangerment finding actually is. So this is, to me, Jake, I know that the environmental left is losing its mind right now, and somebody should do a welfare check on the Sierra Club and NRDC and a few others, to maybe Michael Mann, a few others that have made their life's mission to eliminate fossil fuels from the United States and force us into the Stone Age on wind and solar. Might want to check on them. They're probably losing their minds right about now. However, what this does, it doesn't stop stupid states like Colorado from getting aggressive on climate policy. It simply makes them own it. So what we're doing is actually aligning federalism and accountability with policy. So if Colorado wants to go to net zero and take the state over a cliff, they can't look at the federal government. The EPA is not going to be their backstop. You can't go blaming the EPA for it, because the EPA, in its wisdom, actually I should say finally found some wisdom, and is repealing this, it's controversial Obama-era finding on the impact of greenhouse gases on health. Now, a couple of things on that. Number one, more dangerous than any greenhouse gas by far, the real existential threat is no power. And that's where we were headed under this endangerment finding, was to be a scarcity of electric power and a scarcity. This is, to your point, this addresses motor vehicles, but make no mistake, it's going to trickle down to the other areas. It will be used in those other areas. So in that case, you know what, I'll give the alarmists credit. They'll know it's going to go into other areas. You're absolutely right. You know what? We're going to start using it on stationary sources. It's going to eventually impact that. But the point being, what the endangerment finding was being used for was as a blunt force, taking a sledgehammer to the entire economy.
Yeah.
I will say this: when I was on the transition team for EPA, EPA's budget was tiny then. So 2016, I don't even know what it is now, but 2016 it was about $8.3 billion. But here's the thing: so tiny little budget by federal government standards. Every single agency had to funnel through EPA. Everything had to go through EPA for environmental approval. And part of that is the endangerment finding. That's the thing. And it was used as this blanket, blunt force instrument to really control and ultimately destroy the economy of the United States. And here's the last thing, and I'll say this on it. If environmentalists want the United States to regulate greenhouse gases, and you want it at a federal level, then Congress needs to pass that law.
Hear, hear.
That's what needs to happen. So what's not happening, it's not as if all climate policy disappears overnight.
Right.
What it means is that we in Colorado have to hold our elected officials accountable for what we pass in the state of Colorado. Nobody at the federal level is going to make them do anything right now. And here's what I hope. I hope somehow, and I realize this is a big hope. It's like wishing I were 6 inches taller or something, but I would love to see Congress somehow codify eliminating the endangerment finding, or something saying the EPA is not allowed to regulate greenhouse gases, in this sort of blunt, blanket way unless Congress passes a law. That's what should happen. So the idea that the sky is falling, no, because one, I'm not, the sky falling if you're an environmentalist, because I'm not that lucky. That's number one. Number two is this simply means Congress has to do its job.
Yep.
You're aligning accountability with policy.
Yep, that's just music to my ears. I'm glad you made that point, because I was going to jump all over that. Is it really just comes down to another instance that we've seen. This has been a hot button topic for folks on our side of the philosophical spectrum for a long time, but it really comes down to Congress do your job. What this was the Clean Air Act specifies that the EPA can regulate pollutants, right? It uses the term pollutants and it specifies a few. And then on its own, it tried to just sort of shoehorn greenhouse gases under that pollutants umbrella, even though Congress never included them in the statute, the Clean Air Act, in the first place. And so, to your point, if federal lawmakers and they determine that there's enough people that really have an appetite for the EPA and the rest of the feds to regulate greenhouse gas emissions, write it in a freaking law. That's your job. You're an elected official to represent the people and to enact laws. So it's really not the end of the world. It's just sort of, to my reading, rectifying what the statute says and what administrative agencies are allowed to do with written statutes. They're not allowed to just invent law. That's not their role in our constitutional structure. And so there you have it. To your point about Colorado and federalism, yes, this is also a win for federalism. I don't want to get listeners' hopes up, though, because Colorado has actually passed statutes at the state level that recognizes greenhouse gases as a pollutant. And so it has this whole web of state-level regulatory apparatuses that can regulate this stuff. It does get a little tricky with vehicles, though. It's funny that this is specifically referring to the motor vehicle portion of the endangerment finding, because that really is federal. And so the interplay between this and then the earlier action that the Trump administration did to sort of rescind California's waiver ability to set its own emission standards for vehicles. I know that's being fought in the courts. California, I think, sued right away. I don't think they're going to win that in the end. We don't know that yet, but should that fall, and with the endangerment finding going away, that does, I think, potentially unravel all of Colorado's EV mandates. But
yes, to that point, it doesn't mean, though, because those are executive order.
Yeah.
If the state of Colorado wanted to outlaw, combustion engines and make everybody ride bicycles, I don't think I don't think they'd be successful. But I don't know that there's anything, unless you get into some kind of interstate commerce with highways and everything else. But I don't think it would stop them from incentivizing electric vehicles.
No, they could still do that.
They do things like that. Do everything you can to or pass a gas tax to make gasoline much more expensive.
That's right.
Pass a draconian road maintenance. We already did that. Yeah, we did that. I forgot. So we're still driving. But if they did, or they gave you a huge tax break for driving EVs or something like, there are things that they could do to make it much more difficult to drive an internal combustion engine. But I also think there will be, a couple of things. One is, I think there are going to be lawsuits that you're going to start seeing more of those nuisance lawsuits, because it won't stop a nuisance lawsuit.
You're right.
And actually, I was looking at Harvard's Environmental and Law Center, their Energy Environment Law Center, and they actually talked about the increase of these nuisance lawsuits, which is why some of these lawsuits, like the one against Suncor, which is why those are so important now.
Yeah.
We need the Supreme Court to take it and say, listen, or if you lose, you have to pay. I mean, if you're on the losing side of one of those, and you're a plaintiff and you lose, there has to be a penalty for that.
Yeah.
So it all of Colorado's stuff is not going away right now. So sorry, we still have net zero in our future, 100% renewable by 2050 in our future. All of that is still there, regardless of whether or not the endangerment finding goes away, which it is.
Right.
But it'll be litigated.
I'm sure, yeah. If by the end of this episode there hasn't been a lawsuit filed against this, I'll be shocked to say.
Right.
But your point stands, though, that once it does go away, and should those lawsuits be unsuccessful or whatever, the onus then for Colorado's entire sort of climate apparatus will be with state policymakers.
That's right.
And frankly, that's the way it should be in our federal system.
100%. So you know what? Start asking your state lawmakers where they are on this stuff now.
Yeah. But speaking of state lawmakers, moving beyond sort of the big EPA news, wanted to do a little bit of an update. I think we did a session preview when the session first kicked off and the first batch of energy bills dropped. But there's a couple more that I think it's worth bringing to your guys' attention. One of them is another data center bill. So we talked about House Bill 1030 previously, because that was dropped really early in the session. And we had some not so charitable things to say about that bill, because it's just full of red tape, and there's a big generous tax credit for data center operators. So taking your Tabor refunds to give it to a tech company. And so not really to our taste, but boy, did we underestimate the extent to which things can always get worse in Colorado, because once again, almost breaking news, late last night, Senate Bill 102, so SB 26-102, titled Large Load Data Centers, was officially dropped. And there had been some speculation that a bill like this was coming. I saw media coverage early in the session talking about that other data center bill, that progressives were really unhappy that they thought that bill was just too generous to data center operators and it's too incentivizing to these evil tech companies coming. So they wanted to really, ramp up the environmental mandates and protections from these data centers. And boy, did they do that. So Senator Kathy Kipp and Representative Kyle Brown have dropped this bill, and it's 34 pages long. Obviously, we'll drop it in the show notes. I won't be able to give you the rundown of everything that this bill does, but just to give you a sense of what they're driving at. So they set anything larger than a 30 megawatt data center. So we're not even talking about just hyperscalers here. We're talking about even modestly sized data centers, that no later than 2030, the PUC has to set what they call hourly matching requirements for them. And the hourly matching that they're referring to is matching the demand of the data centers, the energy that they demand, to renewable energy generation. And then by 2031, any data center operator that's allowed to be here in Colorado must either generate itself or purchase enough electricity from renewables only to meet 100% of its annual electricity needs. So it's essentially a 100% renewable energy mandate for data centers by 2031, which is 20 years earlier than the rest of the state is required to be at. So I think it's safe to say, and they may paint this as, well, we're not anti-data centers. We just want them to be clean. But I think we know, and our listeners, I trust, are smart enough to know what this really is we're going to screw you, data centers. We're setting this mandate so you don't ever show up within the four borders of Colorado.
This is 100% the I hate data centers bill.
Yeah.
I hate growth. I hate data centers. I hate power. And we're going to make you pay in every way possible. And I will say this. So Senator Kipp is from Fort Collins, northern Colorado. They used to think of it, the triad, Fort Collins, Loveland, and Greeley. That's northern Colorado. Let me just say this right now. There is a reason why those of us in Weld County look at Fort Collins as crazy, because of that kind of stuff, and it's why also I think. Besides the fact that we have Greeley, Weld County has land, and Greeley, there's land and there's services and everything. It's not as backwards as Fort Collins would pretend that we are, but it's why our population will exceed Fort Collins, they say, by the end of this year, because Fort Collins has crazy stuff like that. That is the worst anti-growth. This is somebody who's looking to the future, doesn't like what she sees, and is going, let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to 2000. It is the Wyoming Economic Development Plan. Yeah. It is that giant sucking sound you hear will be all the data centers leaving Colorado and going into Wyoming. You're right. I love what you said when you said, just when you think it can't get worse.
Oh yeah.
They can prove us wrong.
Yeah.
And clearly on this one, they did. I don't even think I can take that bill seriously. And hopefully no one in the legislature will either. Hopefully it dies. But I will say this, there is that sentiment. And it isn't just on the left. Nope. It is both sides look at data centers as some kind of huge problem.
Yep.
Now, I will say this. There is an interesting thing I learned recently, especially, and those of you out there who know data centers know this way better than I do, but it isn't just the amount of electricity that they use, it is how they consume it. So AI can be, it's very spiky. So they can use a lot if it's training, and then it can drop, and then it can go up, and then it can go down and up and down. And so that is not, like, our grid isn't suited for that. That is not the way our grid, it'll go dips like this, but it doesn't do well with this, which is why it's very hard to incorporate intermittent resources like wind and solar, because wind blows and then sometimes it doesn't. The sun shines and sometimes it doesn't. And they say batteries will balance that out. Well, not over a long period of time.
Right.
If it's like Winter Storm Fern, where you go days without power from your wind and solar. But so there's this part of it, which just brings me to this other point, Jake. We've talked about these data center bills. If they would just pass a CRE bill, a data center could do all of this all on their own.
Right.
Just do it on your own. They can buy cheap land somewhere. I don't know where that is in Colorado, but buy land that is cheaper. You know what? Maybe buy a vacant building downtown Denver.
Yeah, a lot of them are going up for sale.
We've got those.
Yeah.
Get some land, get your data center, and let them have their own islanded grid. Just let them have it. You could even have the utility be the provider. But it's an islanded grid that only the data center pays for, and they can use energy how they want, however they need it, as opposed to trying to force them onto our central grid, which is not the best place for them, and then having them jump through hoops.
Yeah.
This is just, it's just nuts. It's nuts. So
It is nuts. There's no need for the hostility on either side, and there's no need for trying to erect these ham-fisted, crazy regulatory schemes with all this red tape. If you just be flexible, we can handle data centers. We can do it sensibly. We can allow them to, provide the economic benefits that they can provide and help power our modern digital economy without either A, shoveling a bunch of tax dollars at them, or B, trying to, smother them with a pillow before they even get here. So
smother the baby in the crib. I don't know what it is about data centers that makes people go crazy. Like they lose their collective minds.
Yep, you're absolutely right. And there's plenty more in this bill. I would encourage folks to give it a look. Hopefully, you don't have to take it too seriously. It has fewer co-prime sponsors, I noticed, than that other data center bill, which tells me maybe a little bit, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be that way forever. Things can always change under the Gold Dome, and we'll for sure be providing updates on this one because I think industry is going to freak out just a little bit about this once they see it. One other bill we wanted to touch on before we wrap up here is actually a little bit more on the positive side, I would say. This is House Bill 26-1129. And this is a bill mostly by GOP lawmakers. It's got 2 sponsors from each chamber, and it's really aimed squarely at the clean heat plan that we've talked so much about here on the show. And what it would do is essentially exempt residential gas customers from the entire clean heat plan paradigm. So yeah, utilities can still file their clean heat plans and show that they're reducing their emissions, but residential emissions won't be counted, and so they won't have to do anything to rip out your furnace or whatever, or try to incentivize you to get a heat pump because you would be excluded from that whole smothering regulatory scheme.
Yeah, this is a bill that I would love to think would pass because there would be cooler heads would prevail and common sense would rule the day in the Gold Dome, but again, I could also wish I'm 6 inches taller at the same time. This bill is desperately needed. I hope this, if I'm thinking positively, follows the same path as nuclear, that it gets introduced, it gets killed, the next year it gets introduced, gets out of committee, and then gets killed. But that eventually we, like I said, cooler heads prevail and we realize we're not getting rid of natural gas. This actually, of all the bills, I think this is one of the single most important bills that we have in this legislative session, because what is coming with the clean heat plan, I still don't think Coloradans realize that we are on the verge of destroying our grid and ultimately destroying our economy. Again, the Wyoming Economic Development Plan, because you will not have access to natural gas anymore. And, I recently did an op-ed that will drop in the show notes, but part of this, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, but it hits closer to home with an event like Fern, where you had people in the Southeast who were out of power for days. And for them, by the way, their houses are not insulated the way ours are here.
Right.
And you get several days of 20-degree weather there. Your house is getting close to 20 degrees.
Right.
But folks who had natural gas could at least have a fireplace going, or maybe they have some kind of, or you can use your stove if you light it manually. So you had some heat that saved you. All that provides is it's a parallel track for fuel, right? So you have 2 different systems. You have redundancy, you have resiliency. You don't have everything in overhead power lines. And that's what just astonishes me about Colorado. Farmers actually buy insurance to hedge against weather. And yet Colorado wants to turn all of its grid over to weather-dependent resources and then have it be overhead power lines, which, by the way, get shut off when the wind blows.
Right.
We will have no redundancy. We will have no parallel track. There will be no resiliency in our power supply. And we lived this in North Carolina when there was the hack of the pipeline. Russians hacked the pipeline, and there was no resiliency. There was no redundancy in North Carolina's gasoline supply. We went 2 weeks without getting gasoline. I mean, people were frantic. You saw lines that went that miles long. And if I hadn't gotten a call from somebody who had friends in DC who said, get to the gas station. I went to the gas station at about 1 o'clock in the morning, the night before that whole thing hit, because it was the next day, it was all over, and you couldn't get gas. I filled up plastic cans, and I filled up my car. But the point being, we have to have redundancy and resiliency, and we don't right now. We're eliminating our redundancy by getting rid of natural gas in the state. And make no mistake, that is exactly where it's going. This bill, which says it would exempt residential, is a step forward, but it's one of the single most important bills we'll have all session.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and you make a great point about the need for resiliency. That's why I'd love to see all classes of customers exempt from the clean heat plan, but if you're going to focus on one, I think it is savvy to raise the salience of the residential ratepayers, because something like 70% of homeowners in Colorado use natural gas to stay warm. I don't think it's quite dawned on the vast majority of them what's happening to their heating system and where it's headed. And so raising this, like you said, this is going to die. It's probably going to die in its first committee hearing. But I think raising it as a salient political issue, putting it on the radar, making lawmakers go on the record and say, no, we really did mean it when we said we want to rip your natural gas furnace out. I think that's pretty savvy, and I think the people of Colorado will appreciate that if they're not already aware of what's going to happen and what's quickly coming down the pike for the future of their home heating. So we'll update you on what happens with this bill and when it gets to its first committee and when it likely dies in that committee. But I think this conversation is not going away, and we certainly are not going to let it go away, because we're going to raise it every single chance that we get what the state is trying to do. But as we're coming up on time here, Amy, do you have any takeaways for our listeners?
I do. Remember, it's a good day to make things right. So just endangerment finding has been officially rescinded by the Trump administration. And I want to say promise made, promise kept. So I'm thrilled for that. Two, the legislature seems really hell-bent on keeping the Wyoming Economic Development Program alive and well for Colorado. And then the last thing is, as you know, you have to firm your own grid, because this legislature and this governor, and dare I say, whoever is the next one, are not going to do it for you. So make sure you have a generator, batteries, whatever it is you need to power the appliances that are so important to you. Which brings us to this beautiful thing, the Predator super quiet inverter, 2,000 max starting watts, 1,600 running watts. You can do a lot with this guy. So here's, if you want to know how to win it, those of you who are new to the show, the rest of you, just listen up and make sure you drop your comments in. All you have to do is go to our shows beginning from the first of the year, and we're going to take it all the way to the end of the legislative session. Feel free to comment on what we say, what we talk about, bills, whatever. Put a comment into, you go to our YouTube channel, PowerGab.org, drop comments in there, and we're going to pick a handful of them, and we'll go through each one, and we'll pick a handful, and we'll share them with you on the air, and then we'll whittle them down. You have to be clever, funny, pithy, something. And it doesn't have to be long. It can be short, just, so long as if you can make your point in 5 words, God bless you. But we'll pick those comments, and then we'll whittle them down. And then at the end, we're going to actually let you vote on your favorite comments. And we'll be sharing those again throughout the legislative session. So make sure you get your comments. And that's how you win one of these. We like to put our money in your home with your own inverter. We'll help you firm your own grid.
Make sure you start filing those comments, folks, and we'll be on the lookout for them. But that does it for us on another episode here of PowerGab. If folks like what they saw, they can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every week. We're also available wherever you get your audio shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests you'd like to see us interview on the program, you can send those our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. But until next week, we'll see you.